Hi, so this is Harvesting Infinity. I think we're up to episode 16, and we've been interviewing people in the Berkshires who are talented and have figured out how to harvest infinity themselves. In my mind, they're creative outliers, which means they, just like all kids, grow up being creative, but when they become adults, they stop being creative because they have mortgages and families and responsibilities. But there's a small select group of people who manage to stay creative anyway, even with all the other parts of life going on. And I call those people creative outliers. And just because they're talented and creative and smart does not mean necessarily that life is easier for them, because it's hard to be creative when most of the world doesn't want you to be. So I tend to be attracted to people who manage to not listen to what the world told them, and they continue to be creative anyway. And that's how I met Elizabeth Berliner, whose also stage name was Jane Doe, and she's been performing for a lot of years. And since we know each other for a while and we've played together, we have an infinite number of topics to talk about. And since this is called Harvesting Infinity, I guess that's probably okay. So I want to start with, if you wanted people to be able to look you up online, what URL should they go to? What coordinates do you want to give them so they could track you down? I know that's not a simple question.
There are a number of coordinates to track me down. We can start with my website. For many years, I have been known as Jane Doe, spelled with 2 A's. The website is www.janedoe.com, spelled with 2 A's. You can find out a lot by going to the website. It's very interactive. There's lots of history. Check it out. That's the first one. These days, you can find me on Instagram at Jane Doe Music, JAANEDOE Music on Instagram. And then there is my real name, Elizabeth Berliner, on Facebook. I'm known as Elizabeth Berliner Music on Facebook. If you'd like to friend me and get a little more personal, put out a friend request and you can find me as Elizabeth Berliner on Facebook. Unfortunately, you will still find pages on Facebook as Jane Doe. And it's all me, it's all my content. But for some odd reason, I guess someone decided that there was some value in hijacking my social media. So I unfortunately lost my password and my email to my Jane Doe Facebook. But if you want to look at some of the older concerts that I've done, some older videos, you can also go to Jane Doe with 2 A's or Jane Doe Music on Facebook, and you can see that stuff as well. I just am not able to add to it anymore as I've lost access.
How about Spotify?
Oh, I'm on Spotify too. Once again, everything that I have ever recorded is under the moniker of Jane Doe. That has been my moniker for 30 years. I started using that name back in Los Angeles, back in the late 80s, early 90s, when I forged a partnership with Joe Shermy, the bass player for Three Dog Night. We had a production company called Old Dogs, New Tricks Productions, at which time we were sort of pirates of what we were doing, and I became known as Jane Doe. And in all of his little black books and whatnot, you could find numerous phone numbers for Jane Doe in there, and it was always me. So that was the name I started using back in Los Angeles when I was playing places like the Mint and the Troubadour. And I came here and continued to use the name Jane Doe. So if you go to Spotify, you can find any music under Jane Doe with 2 A's is going to be me. I have a number of albums out. Right now, there's the Burns Like Fire album, Jane Doe. And the other album right now, All As It Comes, that's also Jane Doe. Different artwork. I'm always transforming myself, so I may look quite different on the cover of each of these album covers. And then there are some new singles. I am so excited about the new singles. Do you want to hear about the singles?
Sure.
Okay. So in January, I put out a new single. It's very rock-oriented. We put it under the world music genre because it's a little bit more broad, called Inhaling Peace. And I'm very excited about this new round of songs that I'm putting out. I was able to manifest a wonderful producer by the name of Ted Perlman, who has worked, he used to tour with Harry Belafonte, he's played on Bob Dylan's records, he's worked with Celine Dion, Burt Bacharach, a number of very, very, very well-noted musicians, legends, so to speak. He's a legend himself, and he's produced a lot of the tracks on this new album that will be called Emergent. The album's not out yet, but the single is Inhaling Peace. Put it out on January 6th. Just to give it a little added meaning. We all need peace, especially with what's going on in the world. It carries, I think it's picking up steam right now. So it's on Spotify, Apple, all the music platforms. And then there was another single that I put out on St. Patrick's Day called Shamrock Green. That's really, if you're looking for something whimsical, cute, Lucky Charms-ish, that came out on St. Patrick's Day, and there's more in the works right now. I'm excited about the next single that's going to drop this summer called Guardian Angel, all produced by Ted Perlman.
So this set of things that you said bring to mind at least 6 different conversations that we could be having, and in no particular order because I can't remember them all, and then 6 more will come up when you talk for another 5 minutes. You mentioned videos, and it seems like to be a musician these days, video has to be part of it. It used to be that you could just have sound, but it doesn't seem that way anymore. So you've become much more active in the video domain. How's that been playing out?
I have. I'm still learning. It's definitely an evolutionary process. I've managed to put up some very nice reels connected to the Inhaling Peace single and to Shamrock Green, but my pièce de résistance, so to speak, is my video for Pawns, which is another one of my projects that actually started the conceptualization. It was going to be a 3D movie. And
I've seen those giant chess pieces in your yard.
Yes. Yes, the story of those chess pieces even is a remarkable story. I was working with a special effects cameraman from Hollywood by the name of Harry Alpert, and we were meeting in a studio in Highland Park, New York, near New Paltz. And I had to leave the meeting to find a restroom. As I'm walking through, I see this room with giant chess pieces and a giant chessboard in it. So I got an idea. This would be the perfect application for setting this up for 3D because of all the chess pieces. And we inquired about it, and it became just unaffordable to do it as a 3D piece. So I ended up in the end buying the chessboard, having it trucked back to Massachusetts, and my vision was to have this out in the open in a green space. So we put it out in my backyard overlooking the Williams River with all the trees. So you've got this black and white chessboard. If anyone has ever seen The Seventh Seal by Ingmar Bergman, that was sort of an influence for this piece. But this is an 8-minute short that I was determined I was not going to put on YouTube. So we finished the movie. We shot for 3 days. We shot for 6 days. And it took Mr. Alpert and I a year to edit it. And then it went into the Independent Film Festival junket and made the rounds and won all kinds of awards. We were even screened at Mann's Chinese Theater for the Golden State Film Festival. So if anyone wants to see the 8-minute short, you can go to YouTube and look for Pawns, Jane Doe, or Elizabeth Berliner.
Is that the one that got into the Cannes Film Festival?
This also got into the Cannes Shorts and Cannes Cinema Film Festival. There are many film festivals at Cannes, and these were 2 of the ones that we were chosen as official selections at Cannes.
And is it on YouTube?
Yes.
So what's it under? Because it's really cool.
It's under Pawns. If you Google Pawns, Jane Doe, or Google Elizabeth Berliner on YouTube, it will come up in the stream. But usually Pawns, Jane Doe, it will come up.
So video didn't used to be part of being a musician when you were playing in LA and when you came to the East Coast.
Not at all.
But it is now. And I'm imagining that most of the other musicians that you know over the years have not actually figured out how to get into the video universe. So did that turn out to be like really helpful? I know it seems like it's necessary, but not everybody could get it together to do it.
It is amazing how much attention you can draw to yourself and what you're doing by putting up even just a 40-second clip of what you are working on. It doesn't even have to be finished, but you can draw the attention. For example, just last week, I put up a short clip of some test video that I'm working on for the new single that's going to come out. And I was up at 3 o'clock in the morning doing this. By 10 o'clock the next morning, I had over 200 views. Now, in our times, even to get 200 people to show up at a show is a difficult thing to do. So the social media piece has become almost a centerpiece for what you're doing these days. It's very, very important.
So are you creating a YouTube channel? Since you've got a lot of videos now.
I have created a YouTube channel. It needs to be refined. There are 2 of them out there that you can find my content on. One of them is Jane Doe, and the other one is Elizabeth Berlinder. Under legal despotism, my son had originally set this up, and he turned it over to me, so it still needs some tweaking.
So besides this whole video dimension, you also came from not just the West Coast to the East Coast, but like big city West Coast to rural East Coast. And for somebody who's trying to make it in the music biz, it's pretty different to come from Los Angeles to Great Barrington.
Well, this was quite the challenge. You know, as you know, Howard, when I left Los Angeles, I had to take all the leather and spikes and whatnot and put it all in the closet because it was still very provincial here in the Berkshires when I got here. I also had 2 young children. And I was trying to figure out, how am I going to fit into this community and still continue to do my creations as art? And for a while, I really had everything on the back burner because the kids are very little, and as they reached a greater age of independence, you know, I've been able to get back into it and do more. But it is very difficult here in the Berkshires. Although that being said, now because of all of the social media, you can get a lot farther a lot of times just by doing that. The number of shows since the pandemic have decreased exponentially, so it is more difficult even to get live shows. So
everything's become streaming, but you know, we've lived through everything from cassettes, you know, from LPs to cassettes to 45s to 8-track tapes, CDs.
Yes.
And now we're in a world that doesn't use fixed media anymore. It's like in the cloud. How does that change things? I mean, well, to make records, I think it was very expensive. So it got maybe cheaper to stream, but I miss liner notes and I miss the arc of an album that tells a story. So it's a kind of double-edged. There was more context. You could find out more about the people who you were listening to and how to get recorded and who did they record it with. And now things are singles and they're streamed. So how does that all
If you actually go into some of the platforms, not so much on Spotify, but I think Apple Music has a wonderful platform, because if you click on the right thing within their platform, you can bring up the lyrics and you can bring up who produced it, who played on it, which is better than not anything, because with missing all those liner notes and all those things that we just used to pore over when we would be sitting, you know, listening to a record, I miss that stuff terribly as well. That was just so important in terms of really, you know, becoming part of the whole of the whole thing, whatever the record was that you were listening to, or whatever sound you really wanted to identify with. We've lost that. But I think as people get more involved in doing the platforms the right way, again, it might be our generation, it might be a generational thing where younger people don't care so much about that unless they are pursuing some kind of a path in the music world. They might not care so much.
So besides sound to video and West Coast to East Coast and big city to small town, you did another big change too, which is you were a singer in a band, and then you became a singer-songwriter doing solo gigs, or sometimes maybe with 2 people or 3 people, and that's another gigantic change.
A huge change, most definitely. Fortunately for me, I had a little bit of background in this, so it wasn't so much not taking off the training wheels and going without, because when I first started, I started in upstate New York. Cafe Lena was one of the first places I had played at as a teenager. And this was when Lena Spencer still owned it, and I got my mother to drive me to Saratoga, and I went into her and said, hey, I'd like to play here. And she says to me, why should I book you? I said, because I'm in high school and I'll pack your place. So she got a big smile on her face and gave me a Thursday night, and the kids were lined up down Phila Street to come in. So that was when I was beginning to do music as a teenager and doing a solo thing. So, but when I migrated out to Los Angeles, that was when the whole band thing took shape, and I evolved into doing that and had been doing it for years. So while it was a big change coming back to doing that here, it was like, oh, okay, I've done this before. So it made it a little less difficult.
So it's very different logistically when you have a band. Well, you have to rehearse them, and you have to manage them, and you have to book it, and it's more expensive. And the singer-songwriter thing, you do have more flexibility. So do you ever sort of miss the band days, or do you enjoy that flexibility of...
I miss the band days because with the band days, it was families. And that was the whole thing. The Joe Shermy era from Three Dog Night, that was a different family. It was the same guys all the time, all of us woodshedding, rehearsing, doing the shows together. So I do miss that family. And then when I had auditioned for the heavy metal band that I ended up playing with the hair metal days, I missed that family as well. That was a completely different family with a completely different set of variables going on with that. We used to have a rehearsal space down in Carson, New York, where just about every hair metal band in Los Angeles had a room. And you would walk in and you could hear this cacophony of sound wafting through the halls. And once in a while, Gene Simmons would float through and peek his head in someone's door. He even came into our room one night. So that was a different family and a different set of variables in terms of how the music sounded. So I miss the families. The whole band thing, not too much. I did try to do that a little bit here, but again, as you say, and you're very correct in saying, it's very expensive to keep people engaged in playing with you. So
this family thing is a deeper thing even than the music business. There used to be teams that worked together, production teams, engineering teams, lighting teams, and today's world is much more transactional. So people come together for a project, and then when the project's over, they all go their separate ways. So they don't become as much of a family as they used to be, because when people were part of the same band, everybody knew each other's spouses or significant others, and kids if they were around parents. It was really like a family. And this is one of the things that's missing today. And I actually feel sorry for people who are 1/4 my age, because you're kind of thrust into a transactional world.
It's so true. Because even back then it was cheaper for housing and whatnot. The number of so-called legends that I had sleeping on my sofas over the years, because of the ups and downs of the music business, and one minute you have money and the next minute you don't, one minute you have a deal, the next minute you don't. But again, those were fun days. That was family. Someone's sleeping on your couch, you're stepping over bodies when you come in at night sometimes, and it's not so much that way anymore. You're very, very right. It's a project, it's a transactional thing, and boom, you come together and you do it, and then everyone separates again.
So I have another completely different topic. I consider you to be gifted as a musician.
You're very kind. Thank you.
Oh, really? You have to go check her out online. And soon, in the next 10 minutes ago, in the next 10 minutes or so, Jane Elizabeth was going to get up and take out her guitar and do some playing. But what I'm wondering, how young were you? Because you had the confidence to say, I can pack the room when I'm a teenager. So you must have found out that you were talented pretty early.
It is an interesting thing. I've always loved music. My initial foray into music was as a 4-year-old, going to a neighbor's house because they had a piano. And I was so excited about the piano. And I remember climbing up on the stool, I was so tiny, and playing and playing and playing, and then I'd have to get off and run around, and then getting up and climbing on it the second time, and having the piano stool topple and fall over on my foot. So I remember missing my kindergarten tea because my foot was bandaged. I had to go to the emergency room because I lost my big toenail from the piano bench falling on my toe. So that was my initial introduction into music, but I always wanted a piano. Not something that my parents ever did for me, but I started young. When I was in grade school, I went to private school, and I was lining up 30 girls in the hallway to tune their guitars, and they played at the folk masses at the private school that I went to, and I taught them all the songs. The nuns had me in the teacher's room mimeographing the lyrics to Blowing in the Wind and all of these folk songs that became part of the music back in the 60s in the Catholic Church. So that's where it all started for me. By the time I was in 7th grade, I was getting calls from high schoolers. We need a flute player. We need someone to do the solo for Nights in White Satin. Will you come in and play with us? So I wasn't even in high school, and I was starting to do it. And it was just something I loved. I always played by ear. I never took a lesson on anything. And just something that I always did. It was always part of me from the time I was a very, very little girl.
How many instruments do you play?
Not that many. I play the guitar. I play the flute. I play a little banjo, a little bass. That's about it.
Did you ever learn to play the piano too?
Briefly. But it was at a time in my life where it didn't stick. When I was in college, I had to take some piano classes. And I remember giving some very simplified classical pieces that I had to learn. And of course, I'd listen to them and learn them by ear. And when I'd have to go and take the test, the professor knew that I wasn't reading it. So when I had time to get into a practice room in college, I played a little. But after that, I fell away from it because I didn't have access.
You mentioned that there'd be 30 girls and you'd be tuning all their guitars. Is that when you discovered you had perfect pitch?
Yes. Yes.
Because nobody could tune their guitars, but you knew exactly whether it was in tune or not.
Exactly. It was funny. And then, it was a very funny thing. In high school, I had a music teacher. They gave a theory course in one of the high schools that I went to. And the game he would play, he would wait until I would walk into the classroom in the morning, and he'd play a note on the piano, and he'd have the strobe going, and he'd say, okay, tell me what note it is, and is it sharp or flat? And my ear was pretty fine-tuned then, and I would get it right every time, and he looked at me like I was an alien from another planet.
There are a lot of musicians who really, really wish that they had perfect pitch. And in the playing by ear world, it's probably most of the time a blessing. In the classical world, it's not necessarily a blessing.
No.
Was it always really useful to you, or did it ever get you in trouble?
I have always made it useful to me, but I think it was a barrier for me actually learning to read music, because it gives you a bias. It actually gives you a bias, and because of that, I never really learned to read music or charts or anything. And the thing about perfect pitch, even perfect pitch is a discipline. If you don't keep it up on a daily basis, your pitch drifts. And, I've been around the block a few times. I've noticed that my pitch has drifted from what it used to be. But I was a very fine-tuned instrument years ago.
That's interesting.
One of the things that used to drive me crazy was when I would be singing a cappella in a chorus, and we start on one note, and the people that I would be singing with were not professionals.
They drifted.
And it would always go flat. And I'm trying to hold the note and hold the pitch, and it would go flat, and that was something that I always had a hard time with.
So did perfect pitch make it harder to collaborate some of the time?
No.
Okay.
Not for what I was doing. No, not really.
Were people jealous?
Yeah. Oh yeah. When I was a young person, there was a lot of that, and I was very humble. You know, I would back down. In fact, that in a sense was a detriment for me, because I found myself trying to become status quo, and I would try to mediocritize what I was doing so that I wouldn't get the flack for having something that other people didn't have. So that was one of the not so good things about being able to do something that other people didn't have a grasp on.
You know, I got into trouble also because music came too easily to me, so I never learned how to read very well either. I just sort of played. And it does create problems, because if things come too easily to you, then you don't see any reason for lessons or pedagogy or following the rules. And it rippled through into other parts of life, because I kind of didn't want to take any orders from anybody about anything. So it's sometimes a hassle. If things come too easily to you, that is not necessarily always a great thing.
That is so true. Absolutely.
So do you feel like playing some music?
Sure, why not? I'm actually really excited about the new single that I'm going to put out this summer, and it's called Guardian Angel. So I'd love to play that for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a teeny stop to plug in and get ready, and then we'll have some live music.
Okay, I'd like to introduce my new song, Guardian Angel. Enjoy.
Looking up, I see 3,000 bright stars. Just another bright star, eclipsed by the blinding light of the sun, and the darkness makes me feel like I'm the only one. Set me falling, set me falling, send me in a tailspin.
We're back. So Elizabeth wants to talk about some other stuff more than that song. She says there's not that much of a story to tell about that song, so we're going to talk about other stuff. So what do you want to talk about?
The story of pawns.
Okay.
The continued story of pawns. So just to bring you back up to where we were, studio near New Paltz, we managed to acquire this giant chessboard and all of the pieces, and I hired a local carpenter, actor, Renaissance man, and got a U-Haul truck, went down, trucked it back to the house with him and Harry and myself and another helper to get everything back and settled. And even that in itself was a project in making sure all those pieces fit in the U-Haul truck.
I was going to say, it couldn't fit in anybody's car.
It was enormous. It was an enormous piece.
Is it still at your house?
It is still at my house. Now, the history about this chessboard is what's so fascinating. The people that I purchased this from, this man was evidently a custodian of legacies like I have become. And he acquired this chessboard from the time when MSN World had a show, and they did a specific show called Gary Kasparov versus the World. Gary Kasparov, the world champion chess player. So they set it up so that he would be one side and the world would be various chess masters would come in on a weekly basis to make the next move. So that was the reason that this chessboard was created, and what they did at MSN World, much like the studio, they set it up in a studio and every week they would do a move, and then people would have time to talk about it and decide what they would do if they were actually playing the game. And then the world masters would make their move against that. So that was where this chessboard came from. And now I am the custodian of this legacy.
And do you know that Gary Kasparov is right now a commentator on AI on television because he was the world chess master, and when he lost a match to the computer, he totally lost it. He was really, really angry because he was the world's best chess player. And then when AI beat him, he totally lost it. And now he's gotten over it, and now he's become a pundit on television that explains AI to people.
That is so interesting.
Yeah.
How phenomenal.
Wow. He's very smart, and he's very interesting. And evidently, chess players could have tempers also.
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I'll have to find that program. That is absolutely fascinating to hear that he's got a say in somehow in this now. It's very interesting.
Do you know that you could lose 10 pounds during a chess match from sitting there? Because more energy is consumed by your brain than all of your muscles?
I was going to say, absolutely. That totally makes sense because it's all going up into here. And all those calculations and whatnot. That is really fascinating.
Yeah, instead of like a keto diet, you could have a chess diet.
Yeah, that's very cool.
But you have to be really good to think enough to lose 10 pounds.
That's something. He even signed a few of the pieces. I have a few of the pieces that he had.
You know, I've seen them, but could you describe them? They're tall. They're big.
You'll just have to go to my pawns video on YouTube and see it, and then you'll be able to see the magnitude of how they are. They're taller than I am.
I think you once had a party, and the chess pieces, like a lawn party, like it was an outside party with the chess pieces, didn't you? I was at some event in your house some number of years ago.
We actually had a screening at the house. We did a few screenings. We did a screening at the house, and then we actually rented out Berkshire Community Center, and we had a screening at Berkshire Community Center as well for the movie. But yeah, the chess pieces, they're sort of everywhere. You know, sometimes they're in the living room, sometimes they're out on the porch, sometimes they're in the garage, and sometimes they're out on the lawn on the chessboard, depending on the weather.
Are they heavy?
Not super heavy because they have a foam interior, and then the outside has some kind of a coating. Evidently, they made molds of some kind, and they injected the molds with this foam to get the foam, and then whatever the exterior lacquer is on the outside, that's what gives them the sheen and makes them seem like they're heavier and bigger than they are.
So for a less exciting subject, I'm still thinking about we both know many creative people who didn't necessarily have great lives, and there are a lot of people in the Berkshires who are very, very talented. There's an unusual number of artists and writers and poets and musicians, and they're not all rich. I mean, some of them are, but most of them are not. And they find each other here in strange places. Some of the regular viewers know there's a group that meets at Guido's every Wednesday at 11 that I have called the Great Barrington Creative Outliers. But what all these people have in common is they're not quite normal. So people who are gifted are also misfits. You don't really think about it, but exceptionalism causes exclusion. So sometimes when people are like really good, well, they have unreasonably high expectations and demands, which makes them not always such great collaborators. So I want to ask you a little bit about, because you've been in the Berkshires for a while, how's the collaboration climate been? Because there have been a lot of creative people, and a lot of times creative people have a tendency to think that they know what to do. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. And when there's more than one creative person, they don't always agree.
That's an interesting comment that you made, because my experience with collaboration have been, I have been invited to collaborate with a few others, but it ends up not so much being a collaboration as it's their vision and I am contributing to their vision. And I'm okay with that sometimes, because I can do a little something that enhances what they're doing. And as long as it's an enhancement and it's coming from me and it sounds like something I would do, I'm okay with that. But yes, collaborations, I suppose sometimes it can be whose ego is bigger. And I've never had much of an ego, and I always check mine at the door with every situation that I go into. So
this collaboration business and the ego is actually a pretty big topic, because creative people don't necessarily understand that collaboration is a core competency. And if they don't learn how to collaborate, they don't get anywhere except to assuage their ego. So it's a big problem. And even in my Innovation Institute, I'm constantly trying to tell creative people to put themselves in other people's place. And they generally say, well, why? I'm the one who knows what to do. And I go, well, guess what, dude? You can't do it by yourself. And if you don't know how to get along with other people, you will never get other stakeholders in your process.
To get them to believe in what you're doing.
Yeah, so whether you're looking for an investor or a colleague or a partner or a worker, whoever you're looking for, if you can't put yourself in that other person's place, you're going to have a hard time getting anything done in the world. And right now we're experiencing this in the world of AI. Think about it. AI has its problems. It hallucinates. It answers a lot of questions incorrectly. It does crazy stuff. Think about all the people who created AI. Most of the computer scientists in the world I know, this may upset some people, they are better at having a relationship with a computer than they are at having a relationship with a person, which is why they spend their whole life having a relationship with a computer. All of our AI programs are written by people who would actually rather deal with tech than deal with, like, us. So it's not surprising that the tech is not always so user-friendly.
That's very interesting. I never thought of that.
The people aren't. And it comes back to this collaboration thing. And I have found, that you were talking earlier about being in bands, and it felt like a family. And there was a lot of collaboration. People co-wrote songs. Some people were better at playing rhythm, and some people were better at playing lead. But you can't always assume that that's going to happen. And I found out, when getting involved in classical music, that although all the pop musicians I knew and all the jazz musicians I knew, they co-wrote music, they collaborated. None of the classical composers that I met collaborated ever. They did their own thing, they wrote their own piece, and when I attempted to collaborate as a classical composer to get people to co-create the result, they didn't know what to do with that, because nobody ever asked them what they thought. They just thought they were like a hired gun to play a role. And when I would invite them to contribute their ideas, I was stunned to find out that they had plenty of ideas if they were writing their own piece, but if they were working with other people, not so much. And I realized one of the problems in society right now is collaboration is not going on as much as it used to. And musicians were a really good example of that. And of course, it was unstable. People, they would break up. So you could be in a family and you go on tour, and during that time, not everybody is getting along as well as they were when you first got on the bus. So I think this business of, and it's my experience of you has, you've never had your ego in the way, and I've seen you collaborate with a lot of people. And I've seen you collaborate with a lot of people who are a lot less talented than you, too. And they knew it, and you knew it, but you didn't make a big deal of it. But it still somehow creates an unstable configuration, because if you're outshining the person who they thought you were like the sideman, but you turned out actually to have more talent than the person who you were, quote, accompanying, this could be a problem. And I've actually watched you navigate those waters as well. It's difficult if you're a very creative person to. It's not necessarily your first instinct to check your ego at the door, and especially if you have a lot of role models around you of other creative people who never check their ego at the door, and they even sometimes try to beat you up with it until, in my case, I would El Kabong them and like level it out. So, do you think that it has worked to your benefit to be able to check your ego at the door? I mean, maybe professionally versus personally, like you probably had a better life, but how about career-wise?
Well, that's a funny thing, because I wish I had a little more chutzpah in that respect, because I think if I was a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Assertive in terms of asserting my visions with others, that maybe the outcome would be a little bit different. That's something that I'm working on. Not very successfully, I'm afraid, but it's one of those things that will come over time, I think.
In the music world, was it more difficult for women to be assertive than men? Were women expected to be more cooperative?
I think women were expected to be more cooperative, and my experience was that if you were cooperative, your contribution would speak for itself, because the men that I worked with would acknowledge you for your expertise or your talent, or if something was wow, then you would get elevated just based on that. So I was always very easygoing about that, and I would jump into a situation, and that was how I got everywhere.
So have men gotten any better at treating women properly during these last decades?
I think so. I think so. Yeah, I think there's definitely been some evolution with that. Most definitely in the music business. Yeah.
Well, you've been in more
although if you listen to the headlines these days, there are some pretty evil people out there too. But by the same token, I think generally speaking, there has been some evolution as far as that goes.
How about as a function of genre? There's country music, and there's punk rock, and there's classic rock, and there's all sorts of different music. Did those relationships have like different role models in the different genres?
They definitely do. But again, I think that evolution has progressed all across the board. It's not indigenous to any one genre. I've seen evolution with friends of mine that work in the punk genre and friends that work in the country genre. It's pretty much even keel. Men have been basically, I think, forced to evolve.
Thank God. So, speaking of genres, I think you're a little bit hard to characterize as to what is the genre of the music that you're doing.
That is very, very true. Yes. I have things all over the place. This album that I'm currently working on that's going to be called Emergent. I'm evolving, and that's emergence, but there are things all over the place. There's pop, There are some rock leanings. There's a lot of rock leanings in this record that I'm going to put out, and a little bit of country flavor, but not too much. I actually do have some country things in the can that are mock-ups that I have eyes on a specific collaborator to work with on that, to bring that into being. So this is, right now, I would have to say, sort of world music, rock-oriented, rock-pop-oriented, where I am right now. Not so much folk. The last few things that I put out were very Americana folk-oriented, and that's all gone now. I'm somewhere else, which would make it nice to have a band, most definitely. So hopefully when I launch these things, I can attract some people that would want to actually go out and do these songs with me.
So you took the girl out of the city, but not all of the city out of the girl.
This is true, yes.
But you actually, did you grow up in New York originally?
I did grow up in New York originally. Yeah, I grew up in Westchester, in a little town called Valhalla that has a big, giant stone dam in it called the Kensico Dam. It's a beautiful, beautiful, iconic place to go and just hang out and hear a concert or just go somewhere quiet. A lot of people come up to the city to just hang out at the Kensico Dam. If they can't get to the beach, they'll go there.
So did you go from New York to L.A. to make it a music in L.A.? Or did you?
I did go from New York to Los Angeles, and the funny thing about that was I went out there very young. I did a few years of college, which wasn't my cup of tea, in New York State, and I went out there for a vacation with my love of my life, and our dog was stolen. We went out there in a 1969 Ford Econoline van back in the late 70s, and went to visit a friend who had been an RPI graduate, and I ended up getting into a band with Spencer Davis and members of the guys from Iron Butterfly. He was the replacement for Doug Engel, the keyboard player for Iron Butterfly, and we were crashing on his couch for 2 weeks when someone stole our dog. So we stayed in LA to look for the dog and ended up getting work and never left. So it was kind of, I fell into it.
Iron Butterfly, that's Inagata-Devita.
Inagata-Devita, yes. Yes. One of my early mentors was a guy named Doug Engel. He was the keyboard player. Yeah, and he was a mentor for me, and he had sort of left at that point. He was painting houses.
I always felt, since I met you about a decade ago, that you had sort of deserved to make it big like some of these people that you've played with. But just because you're gifted and talented and check your ego at the door, it takes more than all of those things. There's still a lot of luck involved and timing and other people, not to mention being a mom and raising 3 kids. You were juggling a lot. But
there were certain things that I was not willing to do also that make you vulnerable and put you in a compromised position, and I was not willing to do those things, and I was chased around a coffee table many times and walked out of many doors. And I'm glad I did, because that wasn't me, and you see the fallout from that today with people that did, and they may have the success, but they're certainly not happy, and they're soulless, and they've lost that inner something that I personally like to hang on to. I like having a soul.
Well, also you're sane. I mean, we spent time at a place where there were a lot of musicians, and they were not all sane.
That is true.
A lot of talented people are kind of cuckoo. So I think whatever doors you didn't want to go through, you made the right choices because you came out like whole, which is somewhat miraculous.
And I'm still making music.
Yeah. So you're still harvesting infinity.
Right.
You're still a creative outlier, and you're still not going mainstream, so much that you're not even defining yourself as in a particular genre. I think you're your own genre. And I think that's the way to go anyway, because I don't think pandering ever makes anybody famous. Doing what you think they want you to do, that doesn't get you. You have to be authentic.
And I think eventually, if it speaks to enough people, a lot of people who listen that like to call themselves critics will pick a genre for it. You don't even have to.
So look up Jane Doe with 2 A's or Elizabeth Berliner on Instagram, on YouTube, and all over the place. And it's been great having you here. Haven't really spent much time with you in a while.
It's been an honor and a delight. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for having this conversation with me today.
And giving us a really good show, too, from the live music. So that's it.